Hey guys, Savage Joy here with Real Progressives. So tonight I have one of my most requested guests, Mr. Lee Camp. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And thanks for putting up with these fucking tech issues. Um, so today there were a few things which happened that I don't know if you heard about, but it's pretty awesome. So the Black Panther Mumia Abu-Jamal was granted a new
This
hearing.
is the star of the movie Black Panther. Is that correct? I'm kidding.
Totally.
Don't you
Did you
love
hear
how
about that?
don't you love how corporations commodify that term?
Yes, gotta love it. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, sorry, I actually have not heard the news about Mumia. I covered some news about him about a month ago, but what happened today?
He was officially granted a new trial. So there'll be, yeah, which is freaking
Excellent.
huge.
Yeah,
Yes, because he
that is
deserves
huge.
one.
For viewers who don't know. This is a Black Panther who, and he was a well-known radio show host. You know, he was well, before he was locked up. He was considered, kind of a really up-and-coming leader in the Black community and on radio. And anyway, he was locked up for the murder of a cop that he has said he did not commit, and he stuck with that the entire time. And he's been locked away for what 30 some odd years, and it's really horrific what they've done to him. He is definitely a political prisoner. And the thing I covered a couple of months ago, which was hilarious, is that the district attorney announced they had found, quote unquote, 15 or 20 or 30 boxes of evidence about his case that no one had noticed for the past several decades. And that's not you when you have a case against someone, you're supposed to show the other lawyers. They're supposed to get to know what you have access to. And these boxes of evidence just marked Mumia were in like a storage closet somewhere. And anyway, it just goes to show how disgusting this whole thing has been against him since day one.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that he's black. It was just an accident. I'm sure.
An odd coincidence, yes.
Hmm. So something else that happened today was a judge ruled that it is okay for residents of Flint to sue the city of Flint. We're talking 5 years later. Why they need permission, I don't fucking know, because it's, egregious. But do you consider that at least somewhat of a victory?
Yeah, I mean, I hope they can get some justice in the courts, but in a lot of ways, it's too little, too late. I mean, these people want to be able to live their lives. They want the child mortality rate is shot up, so many people have lost their children basically because of the lead pollution, the water pollution in Flint that has destroyed their system. And I know, plenty of people know what's gone on in Flint to some degree or another. But I don't know if people remember that the reason this happened was the emergency manager law in Michigan allows the governor to get rid of democracy. Remember that thing we were supposed to have that everybody was supposed to be really excited about? Like, oh, America, we have democracy, or at least a republic, or some sort of we vote and they're in office kind of thing. Well, they had in Michigan instituted and this whole idea was created by corporate think tanks and probably Koch brother think tanks, and it allows the governor to put in emergency managers, quote unquote, unelected, and just say they're handling things. So they did that in several cities around Flint and around Michigan, and this emergency manager said, well, to save money, we're going to switch to the water from the Detroit River. I believe it's the Detroit River. And the water was so toxic that it eroded the pipes, the lead pipes, which then put all the lead into the water. And so that's one level of corporate malfeasance that allowed this to happen. Another is that then the EPA apparently knew there were issues with the lead. The state officials knew there was issues with the lead in the water for a year before any of us found out, before anyone was talking about it in the national media at all. And, you had people running around saying, our water's not right. They're holding up bottles of brown colored, yellow colored water. And people did know this was going on. The EPA knew, and it was all basically covered up or ignored because they knew that replacing those pipes would cost hundreds of millions of dollars, which it does. And it's, fucking outrageous that we're still, how many years has it been? 5, 6 years? We're still, people in Flint are still have toxic water. It's ridiculous.
Did you actually see Michael Moore's 11:9, the section about Flint?
I did not see that one, no.
They reminded us how Obama came and pretended to take a sip of the water and twice while he was sitting next to the fucking douche nozzle who didn't do anything about it. And then they talked about the army that was practicing drones and stuff in Flint because they didn't give a shit. So these people were just on their property and looking up and seeing explosions, which they never told them was going to happen. So it's basically the epitome of gentrification. Yeah, it was, he did a good job putting it together. I'm not the biggest fan, but he did a good job.
Yeah, another story that hasn't gotten a lot of coverage is that Nestle has a deal with Michigan, very near Flint, to you basically take the water, quote unquote, purchase the water from nearby Flint, which is clean water, the clean river water, and they pay Michigan for that, for the honor of stealing all their clean water. They pay Michigan a whopping $200 a year. To steal all of so much water from Michigan near Flint. I mean, it's honestly, you couldn't come up with such like villainous actions if you were writing some sort of Austin Powers script.
Yeah, and he also interviews a woman who worked for Governor Snyder and how he like harassed her into lying about the numbers in the lead. Because it had to be under, I believe it was 5, but it was like 7. So he was like harassing her to do it. And finally she just quit. So yeah, they definitely don't want people to know for, obvious reasons. So I met you at Occupy DNC in Philly. A lot of us have Occupy DNC PTSD still. That probably won't go away. Are you going to go to Milwaukee for the next one, regardless of what transpires?
I don't know. I mean, they're just theater. I went to the last one because I was invited to speak on various, election integrity, shows or whatever programs, and it seemed like there was a reason for me to be there. But I don't know. If they've already decided the nominee 2 months in advance and there's no protest, then I don't know that there's any reason to be at the theater, the theater of the absurd. But so we'll see. It depends on what's going down.
And it looks like the DNC keeps changing who their choice is. It was like, oh, Kamala is Hillary 2.0. So there was her and, and Biden, who is entering next week. Yay. And now it's Buttigieg. Do you know who do you think is their like golden person?
Well, I think that's part of their game, is to kind of flood the field with enough kind of neoliberal fresh faces that still at the heart of it stand for the same endless war, endless prison industrial complex, largely are behind big pharma and Wall Street and not doing anything about the environment and just put enough of those people in that one of them seems fresh enough and interesting enough and has crazy money. Beto O'Rourke is, as far as I can tell, there's nothing fascinating about him except for the fact that he has no political record, federally speaking, nationally speaking. So you can put onto him whatever you want him to be because he has no record, which some people did with Trump as well. And then the other thing is that he has billions of dollars, I think, because his wife is like an heiress. So that's what the DNC loves about him. But anyway, my point is just to kind of flood the field to water down any support that they know Bernie Sanders is going to have. And then they're hoping that it'll be close enough, probably, that they can push it to a secondary vote in the convention, which then allows all the superdelegates to come back into play. A lot of people are so thrilled that they got rid of 2/3 of superdelegates, but most people don't realize that it's only for the first vote. So as long as they can push it to a second vote at the convention, they can have all those superdelegates to make their neoliberal choice for nominee. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is they also got rid of half or more of the caucus states and changed those to regular primary votes, machine votes. And guess who wins the caucuses? The more progressive candidates almost always win the caucuses. So Bernie won the caucuses against Hillary. Obama won the caucuses against Hillary. So basically, they have made it more difficult for Bernie Sanders or for a true progressive in multiple ways. And then, of course, there's the so-called loyalty oath, where the head of the DNC, without providing any proof, can decide at any moment that someone is not Democratic enough and therefore cannot run as a Democratic candidate. You add that to the fact that the DNC lawyers in their trial said they have the right to rig the election. That is the right of the DNC to rig their own primaries. Their own lawyers said we could go into a back room and pick the candidate. That is our right. So just keep that in mind when you're getting involved with all this. And so, that's why I say that we all need to be focusing a lot on issues. And, I'm not saying you can't support a candidate, but I think we need to care more about the issues rather than the kind of soap opera faces that they have us care about for, 2 years. I mean, this is 2 years of every 4 we spend on this nonsense. A presidential election should be a month or 2 long. It should not be 2 years. And honestly, it serves as such an amazing distraction for your average Americans to not actually be standing up for all the issues. I mean, right now, we should be talking, America should be talking about who we're bombing overseas. We're bombing once every 12 minutes. And who? Is it people you and I hate? Are we really glad our military is bombing those people and killing innocent civilians? So we should be talking about that. We should be talking about climate change. We should be talking about, I'm glad you brought up Flint's water. That's something else we should be talking about. So these issues are so important. And honestly, I think that the presidential election is a marvelous distraction for so many of us.
Well, one of my favorite neolibs, Elizabeth Warren, came out today and announced that she is basically drawing up legislation to impeach Trump, which is awesome. I mean, that's just the greatest distraction ever. Granted, Nancy Pelosi is like probably clutching her pearls because she doesn't want that. But Elizabeth Warren,
and once you get rid of Trump, well, then you have Mike Pence. That'll be terrific.
Exactly. So instead of doing all that shit, why don't we just ignore it because it's been fruitless and hasn't gone anywhere, and that's been focus. How about we ignore that and just try to get a real progressive in there and take them out that way?
And fight for all the quote unquote boring things that even the Democrats don't really want us looking at. Fight for real environmental people that actually care about the environment to be in charge of the environment, and people that actually care about human beings' health to be in charge of our health care, and people that actually care about housing the poor to be in charge of housing. Instead, we have all these people in there, and Trump has put an amazing array of sociopaths into these positions. But under the Democrat, when the Democrat was in office, you also had pro-corporate people in these positions. I'm not saying Trump isn't worse, but it wasn't good. And if we're just fighting about who's in the top office, then we're not really fighting for all of those things, for the things that could actually change this world.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. So have you officially endorsed anyone at this point?
No, and I don't really do endorsements. Even last time around, I said some positive things about Bernie Sanders, but I never, I try not to endorse anyone because I feel like it helps my show, and in terms of, and I don't mean me personally, but I mean it helps to make it clear that I'm coming at these issues from an unbiased view. And so I don't do the endorsement thing, but I will say positive things when candidates stand up for positive issues. So when Elizabeth Warren said that we need to break up Amazon and Google and them, I will say that's a great idea, and I'm glad she's addressing the issue. That doesn't mean that I support her where she stands on military and the way she endorsed General Mad Dog Mattis, who's a war criminal, to run the Department of Defense. So, I really try and go at it more by issues. I mean, the thing I definitely do like about Bernie Sanders is that he is, in a way, blowing up the two-party system. But that's where he ended up letting everybody down last time, was you felt like you were supporting somebody. A lot of people felt like they were supporting somebody who was blowing up this corporate-owned two-party system. And then at the end of the day, he says, hey, go with the corporate candidate. Sorry about the lighting, by the way. So I think that's what upset a lot of people. And I think if you're not going to upend this corporate-owned two-party system, then it's all for naught.
Absolutely. And if those fuckers try to do that thing where you're not Democrat enough, he better just run independent, because I want him to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Fuck the Dems.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I totally agree. You well, I'm sure you're aware Stephanie Kelton joined Bernie's team recently.
Okay, I didn't know she had, but yeah.
Oh yeah, she was first time, and then she just came back. So of course she's huge on MMT and economics, like federal job guarantee, things like that. Is that something you're open to?
Yeah, so the modern monetary theory, I think, has a lot of good points, and I talked to Professor Richard Wolff about it, and he said, these aren't new ideas. They've just been repackaged to in a way that maybe people are responding to them more now. To me, it feels like basically that if you had to really simplify it to a level that it is probably too simplistic, but it basically is that our government creates the money that it uses to pay for everything, and especially the military, because it's trillions of dollars that are dumped into the military. The military has 21, I've written articles and done segments on this on Redacted tonight, $21 trillion of unaccounted for adjustments on their books in just the last 20 years. Trillion with a T. It is unbelievable amounts of money, but that's because our Federal Reserve can just issue money. We can just create money. And honestly, it is like most of it's never even printed. So we're talking about an idea on a computer screen is like all it is. And we do that with our military. Why don't we do that with healthcare? Why don't we do that with our infrastructure? Why don't we do that in so many other ways? And I think that's absolutely a great thing to discuss. I don't think it'll ever happen that we'll start behaving that way, that our government will start saying like, hey, we can pay for all infrastructure because money's imaginary and we kind of make it up when we want to. Because if they did that, then the whole system would fall apart. Because you need the belief in that the idea that the U.S. money is a finite source, or else people don't use it and people will stop believing in it. So money is a belief to begin with. So maybe my understanding of it is too simplistic, and someone else could better explain how it could work. But to me, it's like a truth we need to know that I don't think the ruling elite could ever accept without relinquishing their grasp on the kind of mental chains, the philosophical chains that money is in our life.
Right, absolutely. No, you did an awesome job explaining it. That would terrify them if people all of a sudden, like our entire country, realized, holy shit, we can have Medicare for all. We can have free college. they would flip. Because that's the only thing holding back is
Right.
our fear that, well, we don't have money to pay for it.
And the truth is, even without worrying about MMT, you could sit down and say, hey, we could take a percentage of our crazy amount spent on military and afford so many things, fund Social Security for generations, cover our health care, cover prescription drugs. There's like so many things that we could afford easily with the amount of money we spend on military. 55% of our discretionary tax dollars go to military. So even without MMT, the idea that we can't afford this stuff is it's laughable. It's honestly just a way to trick the American public into thinking that all of our military needs are always funded and there's always enough money for that, but there's never enough money for the things people actually want, like healthcare and good jobs and infrastructure and green spaces and switching over to a sustainable climate model. It's so, honestly, you should just laugh in anyone's face who says we don't have the money to switch to a sustainable energy source and to work in our environment in a way where it won't collapse in 20 years. Like, we can't afford that. Actually, what costs more money? What will extract more wealth out of our society than climate catastrophe and environmental catastrophe, even outside of climate change, even in other ways? We're filling the oceans with plastic. We have factory farming where we have millions of animals in spaces that live their entire lives in spaces they can't even turn around in. And that's somehow okay, and we can't ever switch away from it. There's no reason a McDonald's hamburger should be $1. A McDonald's hamburger, if you actually accounted for the way it's made, the raising of the cow, the water that's used, it should cost, they've done studies, it should cost $200 for a McDonald's hamburger. But we subsidize it all. So we subsidize, that kind of cheap meat, but we won't subsidize healthy food for people.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. So as far as what do you think that the number one aspect of things going on right now, what do you think we should focus on? Not even necessarily with the election, but what is something we should all do and pay more attention to?
Well, I think the two biggest things going on right now are the climate collapse, which, the IPCC says within 10 years, we will be at the point of no return, 2030, where if we continue the same way we're living now, past 2030, then our extinction will be inevitable. There will be nothing we can do to stop our extinction after that point. So if you think about 10 years, 10 years is a blink of an eye, even in terms of human existence, not to mention the length of the life of the planet. But in human existence, 10 years is nothing. It is a moment. It is a snap of the fingers. And we have to change the way we live so abruptly and so quickly. And it should be, honestly, what 70%, 80% of all of our conversations should amount to. How are we switching things to have a sustainable society, a sustainable energy source? Because honestly, it really is like sitting in your living room while your house is burning down and saying, someone says, well, the house is burning down. And you go, yeah, that is something we should talk about a little. But, let's talk a little about the Kardashians for a while, and then we'll get back to the whole house burning down thing a bit later. I mean, when your house is burning down, you don't talk about anything else. You just talk about that. So, and deal with that. So I think that is definitely the most important issue. And like I said before, it's not just climate change that's destroying our environment. The insects are disappearing, biodiversity is disappearing. 50% of all wildlife over the past 40 years has gone extinct. And this is due to the way we live. We live in a way that just ravages the planet, gives no concept. It is our system is life blind. It is disconnected from the environment. It doesn't care if you order a new chapstick from Amazon that is then shipped around the world in a box this big, expending fuel the whole way, goes across the nation, and then you take your box this big and you take your little chapstick and you throw out the plastic and the box and everything out, and you have this little thing, and then you throw out that when you're done with it. Like, there's no, and it costs you 99 cents. There's no concept as to how we're living in terms of the environment. Our way of life has to be intertwined with the impact on the environment. And until we do that, we are barbarians. We are savages who do not know how to live on this planet in an acceptable manner. So that's number one, to be on a positive note. Number two, if we're talking about this week, is the arrest of Julian Assange. This is,
I was going to ask you, yeah.
This is a journalist who has changed the world, both in terms of information, transparency of governments, the list of what WikiLeaks has achieved and done, shown us the war crimes committed by our government and our military overseas, shown us corruption of bankers, shown us what's in the TPP documents that allowed us to get activists ignited and angry enough to get Trump to pull out of the TPP because he felt the pressure of his voters. He didn't get out of it because he was against it. He got out of it because people were yelling at him, and he was like, "Oh, my voters want this." So it's like the amount of good they've done, WikiLeaks has done. Honestly, the amount of free flow information, it's been crucial and amazing. It showed us the corruption of our, sorry for the lights again. It showed us the corruption of our political elite and the rigging of our primaries. Honestly, you could go for an hour talking about the impact that WikiLeaks and Assange has had. And so who has been arrested for all of those things revealed, all of those amazing crimes, all of the villainy and treachery that was revealed by WikiLeaks? As far as I know, pretty much no one, except we have managed to we have arrested Assange and Chelsea Manning, and we're just making sure to shoot the messenger. This is a journalist who has been locked up for 7 years. He's now arrested in British custody in the British Gitmo, and he's being tortured there probably in solitary confinement or various other ways. And honestly, this is one of the most important things going on in our world right now. And it's time for journalists, citizen journalists like yourself, and anybody who considers themselves someone who cares about information and cares about a transparent government that is actually responsive to the citizens. Now is the time to stand up and fight for that.
Absolutely. Julian's a fucking hero, like an absolute hero. And not just as a journalist, but just for doing that. And have you noticed all of the misinformation and misconception? Because so many people think that this is happening because of Russia in 2016 and Hillary and stuff, and they're not even understanding that it goes back.
Yeah, no, the indictment says, so I'll get to we can discuss the 2016 thing in a minute, but the indictment says nothing about 2016. It has nothing to do with DNC emails, has nothing to do with Podesta emails. It only is about him facilitating Chelsea Manning, covering her, creating an anonymous way for her to get at the stuff she wanted to leak. Now, he didn't hack the military's archives or whatever. Chelsea Manning had the top clearance. So Chelsea Manning had access to everything. So there was no hacking of those files, which is what people think this indictment is about. This was him trying to facilitate her covering up her identity, which covering up a source and covering up a source's tracks is what every journalist does. And journalists far more respected than me, because I'm a comedian, journalists like Glenn Greenwald have said the same thing, that this is a journalist trying to advise their source on how to cover her tracks, which is done all the time. Robert Perry said it. Chris Hedges has said it. Many journalists have said this. And then, so to get to the 2016 thing, the Mueller report claims that WikiLeaks was working with Russia. But in fact, Julian Assange has said that is not the case. There's been no evidence showing that WikiLeaks was working with Russia. And in fact, the evidence In fact, the evidence shows that the DNC emails that came out were leaked from the inside, not hacked
Yes.
from a foreign entity. So everything points to the fact that this was an internal leak that presented the DNC emails and the Podesta emails, which, as I mentioned before, showed massive corruption in the DNC and rigging of primaries. And that's what everyone should remember, about what came out.
And the fact that nobody's ever denied any of the shit that they found.
I know.
I mean, well, Donna Brazile denied it once and then she came clean. But it's like, anytime, what about Hillary? Can't we just drone this guy? And then was asked about it. And she's like, I don't think I said that. If I did, it was a joke. People are mad at who exposed the emails, not who actually wrote them. And that's why we all definitely have to be thankful to Julian as well, because he proved what we already knew was happening. He gave us those receipts.
Yeah.
So what do you think's going to happen now?
Well, it's very clear the U.S. wants Britain to extradite him. Britain does at times, although most of their parliament despises Assange the same way our government does. But Britain at times has refused to extradite prisoners to the U.S. because they said our prisons are torturous. They've said, solitary confinement in the U.S. is a distinct possibility for this person you're asking us to extradite. So that's torture and we're not going to do it. So there is a bit of a history of that. But in his case, he is so, famous and infamous to governments that there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to extradite him. And there's also pressure on them. There also might end up being pressure on them to extradite him to Sweden so that Sweden can send him to the U.S. Either way, everybody needs to get furious and stand up and say he should not be extradited and, in fact, should be released immediately.
Absolutely. Wow. That's so infuriating. And I saw you did a video about other journalists who are not coming out in support of Assange. Do you mean MSM, or are there independent journalists who are not stating their support?
Well, I didn't like look up a list or anything, but I mean, obviously all the corporate media are fucking, paid shills that are willing to throw Assange and their own profession under the bus. But yeah, there's a lot of independent journalists that have either just been silent on it. I think probably the most common thing is silence on it. But some that are even going after him. But for the most part, it's just kind of a silence. It's like I don't want to stand up for him because he's been so maligned by the mainstream powers that I don't want to stick my neck out there. Well, for those of you who want to, if you can still hear me, for those of you who want to help Julian Assange, you should look up Unity4J. It's both a website, I believe, with the number 4, so Unity number 4J, and it's also a Twitter at Unity4J. And that tends to have a lot of the best stuff of what's being done, the online vigils, the various protests. There are protests going on all over the world, really, to stand up for Julian Assange. So for those of you who want to help, definitely look that up. I will say that if you guys are unfamiliar with my stuff and want to check out my show is Redacted Tonight. It's at youtube.com/Redacted Tonight. And I have a new stand-up comedy special taped live in Los Angeles with a special intro by Abby Martin. And that is at leecampcomedyspecial.com. I have free podcasts every week called Common Censored that you can look up wherever you get your podcasts. And I think that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, I have my buddy Mike from the Humanist Report coming on, and Ron Placone just asked me to come on his show Monday. So good stuff coming up. Again, thank you so much, Lee. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.